So, I thought I'd do something a little bit fun today. Now I'm not bouncing this camera around all over the place. I wanted to do my rankings of the Showa era Godzilla films, all 15 of them. And I figured because why not? I've been a Godzilla movie fan since I was a child when they were running marathons on the Sci Fi Channel. And these are my opinions. These are not an objective ranking. This is subjective. So your top 15 will be probably be different than mine. But I'm going to start off. This one probably everybody will agree on is normally towards the bottom. It's All Monsters Attack or Godzilla's Revenge. Depends on, which version you get. I don't hate this movie. I actually have grown to appreciate it more now than I did like when I was a kid. It is not the best one, but it is a very kid-friendly film. And the plot being a boy who's been kidnapped, basically daydreams of teaming up with Minya or Manila, depending on translations again, um, and learning how to be brave. It's not bad. Although Gabara is annoying with its roar, it's not the worst movie in the world. So then the next one, this is now number 14, Godzilla Raids Again. And it's it's a very lackluster sequel to the original. I mean, yes, you have two monsters fighting, but Anguirus's first appearance was okay. The movie overall wasn't, you know, it was okay. It wasn't great. So then we have number 13, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, or Godzilla versus Ebirah. Um, it was an okay film. It was originally intended to be a King Kong film, but they couldn't uh, make it with King Kong, so that's why Godzilla, acts a little different than he normally does. And the movie's okay. Again, nothing bad. It was okay. It wasn't as cheesy as films to come, but it was also, yeah. So, next one on the list is Son of Godzilla. And it's just, I thought the movie was okay. It never really stuck out to me. Yeah, you've got a bunch of different monsters in it, but Kumunga didn't really, he's not an A-lister. Yeah, you fight him, but it's okay. So those are the first four. Now after this is when we start to get to some of the, it's a rank up. Uh, Although Godzilla versus Megalon probably is one of the most well-known Godzilla movies. And that's both good and bad. It is one of the more cheesy Godzilla films. And Jet Jaguar is pretty interesting, but he's nothing that's absolutely incredible. Um, yeah, they did more with him in Singular Point, but other than that, Megalon was okay. Seeing Gigan again was fun, but this also had some of the more infamous joke things, and this was also when they were doing the whole budget slashing. But, you know, I do appreciate the film, and I like to throw it in sometimes every now and then. Up next, and this one might be controversial. Uh, Revenge of Mechagodzilla. You see, I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. Yeah, it's good. Titanosaurus is pretty neat, except for his roar. Um, and overall, it was, to me, a little bit more lackluster because Mechagodzilla in the first film, um, he's a powerhouse that required two monsters. In fact, he fought against three monsters, just not all at the same time. And I'll get more into that later. But Revenge of Mechagodzilla or Mechagodzilla's Revenge, was okay. It was pretty neat seeing the whole androids and having the aliens back, but I think the film was okay, not great. And that's where I think I probably get people pissed off at me. Up next is Godzilla versus Gigan. And, when I was a kid, I thought the idea of having the best friends, Godzilla and Anguirus, teaming up, fighting against Gigan and King Ghidorah or Ghidorah, um, I thought that was awesome. Going back and watching the movie in English later, the movie's not that great. And then watching it even more recently in Japanese, that was much better. The movie is much better in Japanese over English, because it's better. There's just the dialogue's better, the acting. It's not cheesy, but the one thing is the low budget situation became super apparent because I had recently started watching all the Showa era movies. And when you see King Ghidorah going around blasting his gravity beams, and you realize that it is literally footage from, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, um, they just darkened it. It kind of threw me out of the movie. I was like, oh, but it's a fun movie. It's good, and it is, midway on the list. And up next, we have another one. Maybe it's a little controversial. I don't know. Invasion of Astro Monster. So, Invasion of Astro Monster was the sequel to Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. And in this, it's Godzilla and Rodan getting sent to another planet and having to deal with King Ghidorah. Um, it's a lesser sequel to the first one, which I'll go into more detail when I reach that one. Um, but it's fun. I mean, there's not too many movies in the Godzilla franchise where they leave Earth. In fact, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones where the monsters leave Earth, and I'm blanking on it. Um, so it's overall a fun movie, but you know, now we're getting into the closer to being the cream of the crop, and I had to put a little bit more thought into where I put all of this around. So the next one is King Kong versus Godzilla, and that one I would say it's an all around fun movie. A little dated now. The costume looks absolutely terrible, but it was I think it was the first movie that was billed as two monsters fighting, and it was the two biggest named monsters. This was also the third Godzilla film. Um, Godzilla versus King Kong had, or I should say, King Kong versus Godzilla had a whole rumor going on at the end that the Japanese version had Godzilla winning. The director said that he felt like it was a draw, but the official ending is the one where King Kong is the one who walks away, and Godzilla was the one that not was apparently killed, but he really wasn't. King Kong having these electric powers is something that I'm kind of hoping begins to appear in the MonsterVerse in the new films, but we'll have to wait and see. So now here's one. Maybe some people wonder why it's up so high on the list. Well, it's Godzilla vs. Hedorah. And the reason for this is because I grew up watching this movie as one of probably the top four Godzilla films I had seen. And as a child, it horrified me because when you're like 5 years old and Hedorah is in the flying mode and he flies over and people are turned into skeletons and you're a child, um, that's kind of intense. That being said, watching it as an adult, it's a little bit more goofy, but I had watched the Japanese version recently, and again, it's unbelievable how much better the Japanese version of the movie is in comparison to the English dub. Probably because again, they didn't cut certain things out, um, but it was good. So now we are at, let's see, one, two, three, four, five. Oh, the top five, the five best of the Showa era. So we're gonna start with Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, which I mentioned a little bit. This is the first time that the monsters have to team up. Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and they have to deal with King Ghidorah, the three-headed space dragon. And it's a great movie. I mean, you've got some, you got the subplot of the alien trying to warn everybody, and the giant monster coming around, and having Godzilla and Rodan basically fighting each other until they have to team up. And it's a lot of fun. And it really set the stage for movies to come. Up next is Godzilla versus Mothra. And this is the first purely Toho versus film. And this one was very definitely Godzilla lost. And it's a great movie. I mean, you have some of the best set designs and stuff going on in this film, and it's fun. It's absolutely fun. It just Godzilla's like, I don't know, he had a bender or something and was sleeping in the sand, and then wakes up and just starts causing havoc, and he's all tripping over stuff because he's like, I got a hangover. So the top three, if you are familiar, you might be able to figure out which order these come in. Destroy All Monsters. That is the third from the top. I love this movie. I have seen it probably the most out of all the Godzilla films, and I just love seeing all the different monsters in it. I mean, I wish Baragon had more into it. I mean, having Gorosaurus bust out of the ground instead of Baragon was a little bit weird, but the costume for Baragon was too far gone for them to do that. You only get a clip of Varan, which is sad. The only two movies he's in is Varan the Invincible, or is it Indestructible? I think it's Invincible, and then you get a clip of him in Destroy All Monsters. The Key being the villains, and they're like slug things, when they get cold. Um, just overall, I love that movie, and I know that you know King Ghidorah could not take on all those monsters. That no way. And with them all teaming up and everything at the end, it's so much fun. Um, so the penultimate one, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. This is probably in terms of the good guy Godzilla films, my all-time favorite. I love this film. King Caesar is probably my second favorite monster in all of the Godzilla franchise. And I absolutely wish they would bring him back and do something more with him. Um, I love this movie. The Mechagodzilla is terrifyingly powerful. The whole thing with him breaking Angurus's jaw, it's just like holy crap. It was a kind of darker film at times, and then there were some levity. I mean, yeah, you got the song. Some people like the song, some people don't. I'm not in the camp of liking the song, but you know, just the fighting, Godzilla having himself get struck by lightning so he can generate a magnetic field is pretty neat. Um, and it's just overall, it's one of my favorite movies. Also, Mechagodzilla's theme song is a lot of fun. So it's probably not a surprise. I don't see anybody who's super into the Godzilla franchise not putting the original Gojira as number one. And simply put, Gojira is a movie that I think everybody should watch, especially watching the Japanese version. It is beyond incredible. It is one of the best movies you might ever see. It's yeah, it's a little dated now because it was made in the 50s, but what they did and the story is unbelievable. You actually really, really, really feel like just so much going on in it. It's hard to just explain, but having watched both the English version and the original Japanese, it's clear the Japanese version is way better, but the English version is also still good. And going over the horrors of war, basically of what happened with the nuclear bombs and the testing that was going on at the time, and just the idea that, you know, it was in pain the whole time. It didn't know what it was doing. It wasn't evil. It was just an animal, and it had to be stopped with a super powerful weapon that, if used, would be probably more dangerous to the world than the nuclear bomb. I mean, the oxygen destroyer, which now has been referenced in multiple movies. You have Godzilla versus Destroyer, where basically the oxygen destroyer mutated or transformed these little shellfish, and that became Destroyer. And then, of course, you had in the MonsterVerse with Godzilla King of the Monsters when they shot the missile and it killed a bunch of, basically everything in a specific area. And of course, it had no effect on King Ghidorah because he doesn't have to like breathe oxygen. Um, it's interesting. I'll get into more stuff when I talk about the MonsterVerse films, but Gojira is a film that everyone should watch at least once. I mean, you if you want to watch kaiju flicks that are a little goofier, you can watch the rest, but Gojira is not goofy. It is taken 100% serious. It is dark, and I think it's one of the more important films that was ever made. But that's my Showa era rankings of the Godzilla films. And hey, comment down below what order you put them in. I'd like to know what everybody else thinks about it because Godzilla is personally one of my favorite things of all time.